But yeah, they really take the time to make sure it's the right fit and they have the infrastructure to support your child.
I'm Agnes Stowicki, Managing Editor with Our Kids. We're speaking with insiders from Canada's leading private and independent schools to bring you insights into school programs, culture, traditions, and leadership. This includes insights from parents, alumni, and administration. This is the Our Kids Insider Perspective.
One of the things, we were actually living in the US, and Andrew was going to school to a mainstream school. And one of the things that we identified was the fact, and what was recommended by one of his therapists at the time, was to find a therapeutic boarding school. So we actually started out by looking in the US. And at the time, that was in 2019, and Andrew was 12 years old at the time. And what we started to learn, right, so this is a whole learning process, we've never experienced this before, was that we started to realize that there weren't really a lot of therapeutic boarding schools, particularly in the US, but in Canada as well, that had the resources or had the infrastructure to support children of that age. What we found was they were really there to support children at the ages of 15 or 16 years old. So it was very limited. And as we started to realize this, we said, well, look, we're Canadian, let's start to look in Canada as well. Long story short, we found Applewood. And what really differentiated with the resources and the few schools that we were able to find in the US was that their model was more of a host parent, I can't think of the other terminology. I wrote it down somewhere.
More therapeutic than...
Yeah, it was more of a home environment residency, host parent residency, rather than like a school residency, like what we're accustomed to seeing when we go to college, right? And university. So definitely a lot more personalized. And that's one of the components, anyways, just one, that really started gearing us towards Applewood. That was a huge differentiator for us.
And yeah, there was quite a bit of a shift, but it worked out well.
Yeah, and the shift really was, so he went from, being like everybody else, right? Coming home at the end of the day with mom and dad, and that whole regular dynamic, like I think most of us grow up in, right? And so he went from that environment onto a wilderness. It was a wilderness camp, actually. There were some academic components, but it was more focused all on self-development, therapy, building that foundation that we felt he needed before moving on to a therapeutic boarding school. It was more of a fast track, right? How do we put all the focus around his therapeutic development? And then when he moved into Applewood, well, I mean, you're taking this, was a big change for him, living in a home with other students, living in an environment that was highly structured. That piece was a big change for him, but at the same time, it allowed him to be more successful through his day, right? And to learn those coping skills, I'll say, to better manage, adversity and what happens in our daily lives, right? Daily lives of living. So definitely an adaptation period. And I would say it lasted anywhere from three to 6 months before, we started to see significant progress or a shift in him really getting settled, right? So I hope that answers your question. He recognizes now, so he was 12 when he went in, he's 15 now. He would say that the environment, whether it's academically in the school setting or in the at-home setting, has really helped him develop the skills that he needs to be successful in a more, mainstream high school setting, home setting. He now has he recognizes it himself. He tells us that. he recognizes that this environment has allowed him to develop the skills. He feels better equipped. You know, he'll tell us, I feel better equipped to manage, whether it's his anger management, just coping skills for adversity and what happens in our day-to-day lives. That's the one thing he would say about Applewood. What we appreciate most is the time that the school takes, and even in the beginning, as well as today, 2.5 years in, to understand the needs of the child, right? Their dedication, the time that they take to understand their needs, our needs, the dynamics as a family, making sure that they assign the right resources to support us in solutioning, right? Regardless of what it is. So, I mean, in a nutshell, it's just their dedication to making sure that they give us all the support that we need from the teams that they have to ensure that Andrew's success, we're a success, us, to support him in his growth and development. That's the thing that I can say the most about them is really their dedication, their caring, their empathy, their devotion, really, you know. Never at a time in 2.5 years did I never feel supported by them. I think the biggest and I'm gonna think out loud for a second, but I think the biggest learning curve for me, potentially for us, was when he stayed in a home setting with, you know, two counselors slash therapists, I'm gonna call them, with 5 other children. You know, that was very new to me, and I guess I was taken back by how well it worked. Like, I had my doubts, you know. I was like, oh my God, you know, how's this gonna work? How do they plan on, how do they think they're gonna manage 5 kids, you know, with all different types of needs? But I was worried, but it proved to work.
Yeah.
I believe what they try to influence every day, more than, you know, again, anything that's mainstream, even as a family, you know, even in a family setting or an academic setting, what they try to work on every day is really, and I'm going to simplify it, self-development, right? Just making sure that in the case of Andrew, that they work on his social skills, his ability to deal, I go back, you know, his ability to deal with difficult situations, right? So all of his coping skills, his communication skills, how to respect others, how to communicate effectively. So that's a large portion of their academic program. So a large portion of their academic program and the home setting where he lives as well, right? It's all about those primary components. Yeah, and I go back to the team, right? And that's one thing in Applewood that I think, again, differentiates them from other experiences we've had or what we potentially saw in some of these other therapeutic settings, boarding schools. They have I'm going to use the term holistic approach. So, and we're one big team. So whether it's his host parent, Joe and I, the school, the principal, the doctor, the therapist, we're all one big group, one big team working together. And I'm very impressed by the collaboration and how they try to, you know, ensure that we're all working together in his best interest. You know, there are definitely similarities, right? And we've had an opportunity to meet other parents through this parent group meetings that they have, I'll call them, right? Yeah, there are similarities. There's similarities in some of the challenges that we faced or our children faced, right? Or we faced as parents, right? I see a lot of
parents out there with them.
Yeah, because by the time you reach that, it takes a lot of courage to, especially, you know, at the age of 12, when your child is in that, you know, 12, 13 years old, to make the decision to send your child away to school, number one, but send them to a therapeutic boarding school. So I see similarities from that perspective. We all, some of us started to take steps to make that change when our children were 12, 13 years old. Some, it was later on, 15, 16. That's usually the breaking point, as I've learned over the last several years. But yeah, there's similarities. I see a lot of these children in the different situations and experiences that the parents shared, behavioral challenges, how to manage the social challenges that these children have today, anger management, right? Some struggle with depression, and so I see those similarities, right? I see a trend, right? I see a trend happening in society today. I think that I'm gonna say something because it's stronger than I am, Our mainstream school settings, and we've had experience in both the US and Canada, have just not adapted to today's society, right? And so I've always said, Andrew's like a round peg that we're trying to fit into it, or a square peg that we're trying to fit into a round hole. This round hole that I'm 50 years old is still the same today in today's education system, right? They just have not adapted. And what's happening is that children that don't have parents that have the funds or find the funds to send them to, or to send them to a therapeutic boarding school, whether it's a boarding school or not a boarding school, typically they are. These children are getting lost they're getting lost in the mainstream. They're landing up in what's the word I'm looking for? What are the schools where you send your bad kids, like, sorry, what was it called? Anyways, they're juvenile centers, juvenile schools, juvenile centers. That's where these children land up. So, I don't know, I'm just sharing, Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sort of ties back to what we were saying, how he's grown. He's grown. He's so proud of how much he's grown and developed in the last 2 years. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm lost for words, right? When I look at, yes, he would say, I don't want to say me, he would definitely say how much he's grown and developed over the last two and a half years. As a parent, when I look over the last 2 years and I look at the growth, I would say what he's done in 2.5 for me could have been 5, but yes, he really was very proud of the individual that he's becoming to be versus the very angry person he was 2.5, 3, 4 years ago. Very, very proud of that. He's very proud of his ability to deal positively with situations, to talk about his feelings, to, talk through maybe something that he's upset about rather than being angry, right? That's I would say is number one for him. That's what he would say. I mean, the experience with the teachers have been, for me, the same with all of the staff at Applewood. They're very putting it into words. They're very precise. They're very analytical. Their analysis with regard to Andrew, for us, we've always been aligned, right? Like, they've never said anything, and not that I, think that we always have to be aligned or agree, absolutely not. But all of their feedback and his growth and development or areas of challenge, I mean, for me, it was just, they just seem to be always on point is what I'm trying to say, they had him down pat, Well, I would say number one is they truly take the time, whether it's from the beginning or now 2.5 years in, but they really take the time to understand your child's needs. But yeah, they really take the time to make sure it's the right fit and they have the infrastructure to support your child. I go back to that team environment, right? They have, at least for Arnie, but they appear to have, not only for us, but they appear to have what I'm going to call a turnkey solution. They have all the right resources, whether it's from an academic standpoint, so the principals, the school, the counselors within the school, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the therapists, parent counselors, parents, family solutions, family therapists, right? Because it's not one-sided. You're all in it together. So they have a holistic solution. They've got a complete solution to support the children that they feel that they have the infrastructure can make a difference in. I'm assuming they can't take every single child because maybe their solution doesn't work for every single child, right? But in the but with Andrew, it worked well, and I think with other kids with similarities, similar situations, it would work well. That's what I see. They offer in my view, they offer a turnkey solution. And I think the other thing that I would offer to parents would be that, they're not perfect. And they have to remember, it's a team effort. You've got to work with the school, you've got to be invested. It's a team effort if you want results. And that if you're looking for your child to change overnight, it's not going to happen. It's a work in progress. Don't think you're going to send them there for 6 months and the world's going to change, or that child is going to change. It's a work in progress, right? So that's what I would offer them. It's interesting. What comes to my mind is, number one, do your research. Visit the schools, have meetings, interviews with the schools. One of the things that Joe and I did is we hired a counseling company, an outsourcing company that helps parents in our situation find the right therapeutic boarding school. They do a lot of the legwork. They do a lot of the research. So if you can find a counseling, service education counseling company, I don't remember exactly what they were called, that specialize in helping families find the right solution for their children, especially as therapeutic boarding schools go, that would be my number one advice. It's worth the investment, it's worth the money, because they lay the groundwork and at the same time they educate you on what to look for, and they become advocates for your children. That would be number one. If not that, do your homework and take your time. Yeah. And if they can speak to people, and it's hard to find people like us, but if they can speak to people such as ourselves that have experience, then try to find those people.
For more information about this school, you can visit their profile at ourkids.net.